Hello everyone, and welcome back to another video of British Informatics Olympiad questions. Today we'll be taking a look at the 2018 paper and the third question from it. So let's have a quick look at the question. I'll let you have a quick read of the question before I then jump to the whiteboard to explain the solution. Okay, so pretty much here's just the diagram which they have. Well, what we want to do is, this is the number which they provided as input. What we want to do is produce all possible serial numbers which are equivalent. Now, their diagram over here has actually provided like a pretty big clue. How we want to do this is we want to lay them out in a graph-like structure. And what I mean by a graph is like a computer graph, and like not like a mathematical graph. So it's basically a collection of nodes and edges, and all of these are nodes, and these are the edges connecting them. And what we want to do is, this problem is equivalent to finding the maximum distance between any two nodes inside a graph. And the way we do this is we perform a DFS search. So if you're not familiar with DFS, it stands for depth first search. And what this does is, it explores a node recursively until we've reached the maximum possible depth of that particular node. And what we need to do is, we need to produce the maximum distance between any two nodes inside our graph. So let's just start by performing a DFS on this particular node, 146235. So how that would work is, we would explore all its neighbors. In this case, we have to go down this branch and explore this one. And then for that one, we would explore all of its neighbors, and then we go down this branch. And now, before we go to the 142365, we go to this thing's neighbors, and then we go to its neighbors, etc., etc., and then we have the maximum possible distance between this and this, which is basically like a distance of 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay? So this is pretty much how depth first search works. And what would happen after we visit this node is that then the algorithm would come here, then it would visit this node, and then this node, and then it would finally finish off by visiting this node. So how exactly does this help us? So if we can identify what the maximum distance from the starting node to another node is, that can be 4. Then what we know is that in any possible maximum distance between two nodes, this node has to be one of them. The reason for that is because we chose any random node, and then that thing's furthest distance was 4. Therefore, this node must be the next node which we should conduct our DFS on. And the way this works is that, since we know that 4, 6, 1, 2, 3, 5 is the next node we conduct our DFS on, we start from here this time. And then we do a DFS on here. So then the next node which we visit would be this. The next node would be this, etc., etc. And then what we would find is that the longest possible path is in fact to 1, 2, 4, 6, 3, 5, which is the maximum possible path, which is of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 length. So this is pretty much how we will do this. Now, there are a couple of different algorithms which we can use, but first I'll show you the code, and then maybe we'll jump back to the whiteboard to explain them. So if we go to the start, it's quite a long code, and the reason for that is because I have two different approaches which both work. I'll explain both of them in due course. So we have this neighbors function initially. What this does is, this basically generates all possible neighbors of a particular number. So what this does is, like, I won't bore you with the details. It's some relatively accessible string manipulation code here. So it just checks whether two adjacent numbers are whether the two adjacent numbers are in between one of the neighbors, or one of the numbers on either side of those two numbers. So it checks whether n1 is between n2 and 3, between 3 and 2, between 2 and 3, and between 3 and 2. And if it does, it produces a copy of that number, and then it appends it to possible. And possible is basically the array which has all the possible numbers which are equivalent of a distance 1 away from that number. And then it returns that possible. So this is pretty much how we will generate our adjacency matrix of all possible nodes and all possible adjacent nodes to those nodes. So then what we're going to do next is, we'll basically just take that as input, the number and then generate all possible neighbors of that number. And the way we need to do this is we need to do some sort of BFS, breadth first search. And after we generate all possible equivalent numbers of one number, we go to all possible equivalent numbers of those equivalent numbers. So just to make it a bit clearer. So for example, we start with 146235. 146235. And now, from above, we know that this name is 142635. And now, for these, we need to explore its neighbors, and so on and so forth. And then we pretty much stop once we've explored all possible neighbors, and then this expands out into the tree, which we can see over here. This is our final situation which we need to achieve before we can then proceed. So now let's go back to the code. Now we have two different approaches. We either have one of the BFS approach, or we have the Floyd or Warshall approach. And we also have a third approach, which is the DFS approach, which I explained on the whiteboard. However, I've chosen not to code it, since in Python the recursion limit is very, very small, which means that it won't be practical and it probably won't work. So it would take up too much memory and time. So instead I have these two. But again, if you're coding like C++, which I know like many people do, you can also use the DFS approach, which I explained on the whiteboard. Now I'll explain the Floyd or Warshall approach first. Now how this works is, this pretty much just takes all possible set triples of nodes within the graph, and it explores whether there is a path from the first node to the second node, and the second node to the third node. So what do I mean by this? Pretty much, we'll come back to this, but what this does is it initializes a shortest array, which is a 2x2 adjacency matrix, but then it iterates through all possible nodes for I in range n, j in range n, k in range n, and then the shortest path from I to k would have to go via j. So that would be whatever the shortest path from I to j is, plus the shortest path from j to k. And now we only update this if this is shorter than the shortest path which is already present in I to k, okay? And then we pretty much just repeat this for all possible triples, and then we'll be left with a perfect set of all nodes. And this over here, don't mind this, it's nothing too complicated. It pretty much just is responsible for initializing our shortest array with all ones, and is like any distance from two possible nodes is only possible if they are directly equivalent to each other. So we don't want to have any two nodes which aren't directly equivalent, since that would give us like some invalid cases. So in that case, we basically update them with infinity. And what this does is, there's no number which is smaller than infinity, therefore an invalid case would never be updated. That's how we would do it over here, and then we just return whatever the max element is inside our shortest array, since that's the maximum distance between any two nodes. So that's the Floyd-Warshall approach. And now we also have the BFS approach. Now, how this works is, the BFS approach is, as the name suggests, it's basically a BFS. What it does is, it starts from any particular node, and it explores all of that node's neighbors, all of those nodes' neighbors, etc., etc., until we find the longest possible distance between two nodes, which have not already been visited. Now, the visited is very important in BFS, since we don't want to be revisiting nodes which were already visited. And I won't bore you with all the details, but we pretty much initialize maxi to -1, since no distance can be like less than -1, and therefore it's a suitable value to initialize, suitable null value if you like to initialize it to. And we pretty much iterate through all possible neighbors. If that neighbor is not visited, then we append it to the queue, increase the distance from the particular starting node again, and then that's pretty much it. That's how we carry out the BFS for this. And this is the Floyd-Warshall, and these are the two approaches we can use. So now, if we just run this code with the sample test case, this particular one, we can see that it works with BFS, but if we change this to Floyd Warshall, we can see that this also works. So now if we test it on one of the larger test cases, if we go back to the question, if we test it on one of the largest test cases in the mark scheme, let's just say this one, a very final one, of length 19. So if we go back to the code, as you can see, the Floyd Warshall is taking a while. It did execute in less than a second, but only just about. The reason for this is because we're exploring all possible triples, right? So that would take a very long time. But then if we do the BFS, this is much quicker for this large test case. It executes pretty much instantly. So here are the two different approaches. They both do indeed work. But in the end, it's just a matter of whichever one you choose to code in. The Floyd Warshall is slower, but it's easier to understand. So maybe you want to choose that one. But either way, those are two possible approaches you could have used. And I really hope you enjoyed watching the video. Hopefully you learned something new about graph theory. It was quite a graph theory intense video. And I hope to see you in another video next time. Thanks very much for watching. Bye.